Let's talk about underrated drivers. Something that Formula One fans can never stop talking about is under and overrated drivers, and I thought today would be a good time to kind of put a line under it in terms of what drivers do we think are actually underrated. Now, actually, if you want to see a future video of drivers that we think are overrated, then definitely let us know as well. But as always, I wanted to get another opinion on this. I wanted to get kind of a broader view, so I just had to bring him in, didn't I? Tom, how are you doing, mate?
Had to drag him out, didn't you? Of course. Whenever opinions are involved, then I'm always here to give mine out. I'm not afraid to put mine out into the world, and it's good to chat as always, mate. How are we doing? How are we struggling in this horrific British 30 degrees today?
This is not a tan. This is not a tan. This is me red. This is the temperature right now, as you can see on my face. But all of this actually began when I put out a tweet, basically just asking, pretty simply, which F1 driver on the current grid do you feel is underrated? Now, this tweet kind of semi-exploded. So, Tomo, I mean, I don't think you've actually seen, but as of recording, how many quote tweets do you think this tweet got, by the way? Guess.
Ooh, yeah, quote tweets are the measurement of ruffled feathers, right? I reckon 480, I'm going to say.
443 quote tweets on that
close.
tweet. So for this video, mainly we're going to be talking about 5 drivers that really came up, the drivers that I saw the most out of every single kind of, comment and quote tweet that I saw. But really quickly, I do want to touch on 3 drivers that kind of got a few outside votes. I saw them kind of being shouted a little bit. We're not going to focus on them too much, but the 3 drivers that kind of got a little bit of outside shouts were Piastri, Zhou, and Sargent. Now, out of those 3, really quickly, do you feel like any of them, Tom, are kind of underrated at this point? I mean, especially with 2 of them being rookies. I mean, what do you feel about kind of those names at the moment, just the outside shouts?
I wouldn't put Sargent in it for me. Piastri, Zhou. I think Zhou's doing a better job than I expected going into it. I don't think he's doing an incredible job right now, and I don't think there's a perception that he's doing an incredible job right now. He's doing a good job, and I think maybe a bit Zhou. I think Piastri, I think of those 3, I think Piastri is probably the strongest just because of how close he is to Lando, and I guess how highly I rate Lando. When it comes to like under or overrated, there's so many different things that come into it. It's all about what your perception of the general consensus is, which is very rarely correct, because how can we possibly know what the general consensus is across all F1 fans? It's like if you operate in I don't know, everyone loves Lando, thinks he's amazing, then that's going to skew your perspective of Piastri. And if everyone thinks Lando's trash, then that's also going to skew your perception of Piastri. So I would say Piastri out of those 3 names, but I wouldn't massively say I think he's underrated either. I understand why they're kind of outside names.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I've got to agree with you on that one, but I think when it comes to Zhou's definitely improved, but that's the progression I think we expect of a second-year driver. I think Piastri has done a really good job just in terms of, I know maybe the numbers and the points in the championship standings and slowly the qualifying record might not show it yet, but when you think about the context of how much McLaren have been kind of struggling over the past couple of years, I've been really impressed with how Piastri, to me, has kind of hit the ground running. In terms of Sargent, really quickly, I think now that he's going to have the brand new upgrades in Austria, he had the first kind of third of the season to kind of, sand off some of the rookie edges. Obviously, there was a lot of street tracks that are tricky. He was put in a bad car as well. Obviously, the Williams is not great. And he did have a few incidents. So that's totally understandable in the first third of the season. And he's up against a really difficult teammate. But I think now getting into the middle portion of the season, he's going to have the upgraded car as well. I think this is where perhaps now we can really see, just a little bit more of his potential, because I do think he is a fast driver. But again, those 3 were just kind of the outside shouts. Let's move on to the main 5 drivers. And we're going to go actually in a bit of an order in terms of which names came up the most. Now, in terms of the first driver, let's talk about Yuki Tsunoda. So, Yuki Tsunoda, underrated, yes or no? Now, again, there were quite a few shouts for Yuki. I think what's interesting is that I wouldn't necessarily say that he's underrated, because this is really only his first season where I would say, you talked about it. How many times, Tomo, have you mentioned rough diamond? I mean, take a shot every single time Tomo talks about rough diamond with Yuki.
Far too many, mate. Far too many.
But I think I wouldn't call him underrated yet, because this is the first season where I think we've seen Yuki really step up. You know, with De Vries coming in, that was a little bit of pressure because De Vries didn't come in as just a rookie. He came in as the Gasly replacement, I think, in the eyes of Helmut Marko. I think in a weird way, De Vries, after his, Monza performance, was almost like the flavor of the month. Every single team wanted him, and I think Helmut Marko perhaps got lost a little bit in the sauce, and I think Yuki has done a really good job to step up and kind of almost, finally start filling kind of a little bit of his potential. But because it is only the first year that I would say he's really starting to step up and kind of look like the team leader, I think it's too early to say that he's an underrated driver. I think he's just, again, the natural progression is what we kind of should expect from Yuki.
Yeah, I think he's not ready for that Red Bull seat just yet. I think if I considered Yuki to be ready for that seat, and he was being considered as he is at the moment by, again, what I perceive the rest of the world considers him as, then I would say, yeah, he's underrated. But actually, no, I think he's doing, like you said, a good job. He got slapped by Pierre first year, was much closer second year, has, been convincingly quicker than De Vries. Not fully whitewashed him in qualifying. There's been the odd moment for De Vries where he has been able to unlock that performance that, he's clearly a capable racing driver, F2, FE champion, right? So I think Yuki still needs to do this, I guess, a bit more consistently in a car that, in certain tracks it's really struggling. In others, I mean, medium high speed corners, somewhere like Spain, it's quite clear of the Williams, at least pre-upgrades. But then in Canada, the Williams, that plays to its strengths, right? So it's difficult to get that clear measurement of best to worst car. We know it's down there, the AlphaTauri, but it's not a Haas in 2020, is it? It's not a million miles off. So yeah, I think Yuki's doing what he needs to do. I think he's getting credit for it. I also, maybe in part, it's because of how bad his first year was. And even last year, clashing with Pierre in Silverstone, spinning it into the wall on his own in Canada, maybe also, and look, I'll be the first, because I love Yuki, right? I'm a big fan of him, but at the end of the day, when you've had those kind of instances and you've had that difficult start, it does make these highs look maybe a little bit higher, because he'd set quite a low standard beforehand. So no, I wouldn't say he's underrated, actually. I would have actually put Piastri ahead of Yuki in this list. I don't think he's underrated. As a Yuki fan, an honest Yuki fan.
I mean, I'm pretty sure I can speak for both of us. We're not just Yuki fans, but we're Yuki coin investors. So we see the potential that this guy has. But again, he's only
the only
just
crypto
started
I'm interested in.
Exactly. I can't say the same, unfortunately, but that's another topic. But yeah, I mean, Yuki coin to the moon at the moment. He's done a great job at the beginning of the season. I feel like it's been unfortunate that, and I've talked about this in previous videos, that as he's got better in the past kind of 2.5 years, the car has just got worse and worse. So it's so difficult to judge him. And again, I said this, I'd love to see Yuki in that 2021 AlphaTauri right now. Like, let's, run that back with this current version of Yuki. I think that could be really exciting. But yeah, and also up against De Vries, it's difficult to judge him, but all you can do is, beat the guy that's in front of you. So I think, when it comes to comparing him to drivers, when you're looking, I don't think he is underrated, because, if you start comparing him to the likes of, say, the Haas boys, K-Mag or Hulk, I think that's kind of where he is at the moment, maybe a little bit better in terms of how he started, but I want to see more. I want to see an entire season and actually a year and a half really of pure consistency before I say, do you know what, this guy's one of the best on the grid, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think he's got more to prove, that he's got the stock to do it consistently, right? And it's everything that goes into being a racing driver, not just the on-track pace, because I think he's proven the pace and the race pace, those things aren't a massive issue. It's also, can he lead a team, kind of like we're seeing from Alex at the moment at Williams, has gone into Williams and has taken on that kind of team leader role, move that team forward. Can Yuki do that? Is that a string to his bow that he can develop? And I think, again, where Pierre was firmly ahead of him, particularly first year, and again, close to second year, he had his moments, Yuki, over Pierre. He had his days for sure. And I think Pierre's gone on to prove the level he is at as well. And I think it's made De Vries' job more difficult coming into an ascending Yuki, rather than a Yuki we saw even last year. So I think he's moving in the right direction. But yeah, does he have everything fully yet? The diamond is still somewhat rough, but it's not quite as encased in concrete as it was in year one, I suppose.
It's getting brighter. It's getting brighter by the year. The clarity is almost is there. But you actually mentioned him, the guy that's perfect segue. Tomo doesn't actually know this list, but it's your boy, perfect segue, Alex Albon. He got a lot of shouts I think certainly the drive, I mean, 10 out of 10 performance in Canada. He had the upgrades. He had tricky conditions. It wasn't an easy weekend by any means in terms of like just the entire weekend with the FP1 stoppages and then no spares as well. So there's that pressure of not crashing the Williams. But yeah, that P7 was unbelievable. The way he, the Williams played the right strategy, but he controlled it. He was quick in all the right areas going onto that back straight. And Ocon just never even managed to even get near him, really. So incredible result by Alex with the brand new upgrades. Hopefully this is a sign of the upturn of Williams, which would be great to see. But a lot of people, and I don't think it's just been this year, actually. I think a lot of people have been talking about Alex in terms of being underrated. So listen, he's your boy. You got more stocks in Albon than anyone else. So what do you think in terms of the perception of Alex? Do you think he is underrated? Where would he be? It's difficult to judge him the past 2 years in that Williams because it has been the worst car on the grid kind of both years. But what would he be in a midfield scenario? Do you think he is a driver that's underrated at the moment?
Yeah, it's always difficult, isn't it, when it's your favourite driver, right? To try and... Because look, I'm perfectly open and honest with the drivers. I like Alex, Yuki, Ocon. These are drivers that I pull forward. I love their stories. And when I'm trying to look at Alex, it's, obviously you've always got this unconscious bias that's going to live there, right? And I pay more attention to Alex. So I feel like I've got more I've lent on more things. I've got a bigger base of knowledge to draw on when I'm looking at Alex, right? And when I look through his career, so 2019, came into Toro Rosso, him and Kvyat were pretty level. Kvyat did outscore him, but there wasn't much in it at all in terms of head-to-head. He got the shot, I would say 2019 Alex in that Red Bull is the best relative to Max we've had really since Ricciardo. Like that end of 2019, he was quality. He was consistently top 6, like almost every race, which is, Max was finishing like 3rd. That great move on the outside of Sebastian Vettel. I will never forget that into Lagos. It was so good. Obviously gets slapped up in 2020. Yeah, gets can't argue with that. Year out, comes in alongside Latifi, who's obviously not at the caliber. So it's hard. It's very hard to measure Alex, right? Because
replaced Russell though. Since then. So everyone was always going to make those comparisons, weren't they?
Yeah, and I think proportionally that gap Russell to Latifi versus Albon to Latifi was about the same. Obviously they did change a generation of car. Maybe Latifi was even more uncomfortable in this new generation of car. Who knows, right? I do think, bias to aside, I do genuinely think he is underrated. I think he's closer to those. I don't think he's as good as George. I don't think he's as good as Lando, but I don't think he's far off. And he's one of them drivers that I do think, he almost was a victim of his own success in 2019 because he did so well in that Red Bull that gave him, rightfully so, they were like, okay, this kid's got potential. And it flopped hard. It was a struggle to watch. But at the end of the day, also, and I have looked into this, the relative gaps from Alex to Max, and then Sergio to Max.
You've been breaking down the numbers, breaking down every single lap by lap.
Listen, Sergio did a better job, no doubt, all right? No question. He did a better job, but not by much. And the numbers tell the full tale, right? If you look at average qualifying deficit, if you look at average finishing position, Checo did improve, yes, but Alex jumped into that Red Bull in his rookie season, for crying out loud. He was rookie of the year, ahead of George, ahead of Lando. And so I just think the driver he is now, having gone through that as well, because look, all of that happened, I think that's almost in part been the making of him, and the spins with Lewis and all these, being able to come back and Williams giving him that opportunity. Right now, he's doing everything, and I would love to see him in equal machinery to the likes of Lando and George, and just see, because they rate him, you know what I mean? That they rate him for a reason. And
yeah, but Lando had a picture of him on his wall, I think, growing up, so he's a bit biased. He's more biased than you.
Maybe he is. I don't know. I just, he's a hard one to measure, but I would say compared to the general consensus, because some people will always hit him with, you raced me too hard. Oh no, what a terrible mindset.
Brilliant quality analysis. To be fair, by the way, off topic. I wish he didn't say that. That was such a.
It was a terrible.
It was a terrible message. It was a terrible radio message. But listen, we all take L's sometimes. It's how you bounce back, and I think exactly. And what he's done at Williams, it's weird because when it comes to, again, underrated, is he almost benefiting from the fact that Williams is kind of his team and his environment? And I'd love to see him in a much more, I want to see him in a more pressurized environment, kind of this new Alex, because he's not the same driver that he was in 2019 or even 2020. You know, some people have said, obviously, maybe that year off in 2021 was good, but I always think it's always better to be on the racetrack. I think it was just kind of the circumstance of the time because he got dropped right at the end of 2020. So I think it's always better to be racing either way. But I think he's done a fantastic job at Williams, the way he's kind of molded that team around him and how smoothly as well he came. He had so much confidence. I remember, he scored points or a point so quickly in 2022 on his return in Australia. Again, that kind of classic Albon no-stop strategy, drive until the tires explode, basically. So he's become a bit of a master of that, actually. So I think just to get that pressure and how the team felt that, we've lost a superstar in George Russell, but listen, Alex, he might not be as wanted by Mercedes or whoever, but he has seriously stepped up, and I think the way he's also carried that into this season as well, he's obviously dominating his teammate, seriously dominating Sargent, which you'd expect, but in terms of whitewashing him in qualifying, and the gap as well, I think was like 5 or 6 tenths, which is pretty chunky, on average, that's a pretty big gap, so he's just continued that dominance of that team, but the only thing I fear is that I want to see him further up the grid. I don't know how long this Williams rebuild is going to take, but before I can say whether he's under or overrated, all I can say is that he has done the maximum he can in that Williams. There's not much more that he can achieve. He's beating drivers around him that perhaps he shouldn't. He's having these crazy drives when the circumstances and opportunity are kind of, fall into his lap. And I just want to see him in a better team to really get a better judgment of how good is this current version of Alex Albon. You put him up against an Ocon, you put him up against a Lando, what really is that gap? You put him up against, I don't know, even a Valtteri Bottas, is he beating Bottas? That's what I really want to see now, and is he gonna get that chance while he's at Williams? Does he have to leave, or is the fact that he's cultivated this incredible team around him that is really, Team Alex at the moment, that should he stay or should he consider moving?
Yeah, I think obviously Vals does give a degree of faith, right? Because he speaks so well, and yeah, he exudes, even though he's never team principal before, but he just exudes confidence and that he knows what he's doing. He was at Mercedes through the glory years and can hopefully bring that to Williams as part of a long-term building plan. Now, obviously, Alex is going to have a different attitude to Williams than George did. Williams gave him his shot back, which if Williams hadn't, then he might be, Formula E IndyCar now, and that F1 career could have easily petered out because many a driver has left and never returned. So there's that, but also, Russell was always looking for the exit. He was always he thought, I don't know if you saw the lie detector, he was like, he should have just had one season at Williams, right? So he was looking for the exit. Even Williams were contemplating bringing K-Mag in. They were contemplating bringing K-Mag in. Yeah, K-Mag said that in an interview. So, and that he was like, what kind of serious team is going to get rid of Russell instead of Latifi? So he was like, no, I'm going to do IMSA. And yeah, so I think, it is in a position where this team could grow and could move in a positive direction with Vals in charge. And I think Alex, I think he should give them 2024. I think he should give him 24. He's 27 now, Alex, so he'll be 28 by the end of that season. I think give Williams till the middle of 2024, see where they are, see if they can actually use all this ATR to improve the car. Vals can bring in this infrastructure. He says, parts of Williams are 20 years behind. So that needs to be updated. That needs to happen. That's going to take time. I think Alex should give them more time. And if by the end of 2024 they're still languishing at the back, then and if he keeps driving like he's driving, he's going to put himself in the shop window for another team anyway. So
yeah, I'd love to see him. I'd love to see him at an Alpine or an Aston Martin or something. That'd be obviously crazy, but just a team that I think is worth now. Looking at what he's proved at Williams, he deserves the chance to at least prove that he has improved and that he's not just a straight line merchant in a Williams or something. So yeah, he's definitely a driver that I think is he underrated? I think that's the tricky one for me because it's very difficult to judge him in a Williams that is so up and down from track to track. So yeah, he's definitely an interesting one to keep watch. Now, next up, another driver that got a lot of shouts, Lando Norris. Now, Lando is, I will openly admit, I probably tweet about Lando more than any other driver because I find him so interesting. I think he's almost the biggest unknown at the moment on the grid because he has been stuck in that McLaren. He has been stuck in kind of the midfield pretty much his entire career. the kind of 3/4 of a season when he had I'm going to call it an upper midfield car in 2021, when the McLaren during the first part of 2021 was, I would say, the third best car. I mean, I'm never going to forget, after Hungary, this is midway through the season, this isn't 1 or 2 races, midway through the season, this guy was third in the championship, and the other 2 drivers in the, in the top teams, or the second drivers, Bottas and Checo, they were both behind him, which to me was just insane. Now, obviously that McLaren was a very good car. It wasn't as if he was driving around in a Williams. Ricciardo ended up winning a race because in Monza, the McLaren was almost the quickest car, or the third, quickest car. So it had pace, but he used every single last ounce of it. And that's the only, I always think that the quicker car you get, the bigger the spotlight is on you. The pressure was obviously a lot higher. And when he was given the best car he's ever had, he delivered. And what he did last year in the bad McLaren, so almost single-handedly, by the way, kind of Alpine almost crumbled purely because of Lando Norris. And again, what he's doing now, I think there's a bit more frustration. I think the vibe is a little bit different with him because he knows that McLaren keep letting him down. But I think, he's the one in that midfield where I think he's proved everything he can now. Everyone always talks about Lando no wins, and I mean, that is a quality slander name. We know that for a fact. That's absolutely top tier. But the fact that people still hold him to that one result is just like, it's just hating for the sake of hating. Now, I respect slander, but Lando is a top tier driver. You've got to put him kind of. I personally put him, with that Russell, Leclerc, he's up there with those guys to me. And that is why on Twitter, I always put polls with Lando Norris. I always put polls, who would win in a season, him or Alonso? Who would win in a season, him or Russell? Him or Leclerc? Because I'm trying to gauge what people say. And I think people maybe perhaps do underrate him a little bit, because I do think he's a top quality driver who undoubtedly will win Grand Prix, and in the right car, the right situation, I think he could, at the very least, challenge for a title.
Yeah, for sure. I think, that Russia situation, if the team, in my opinion, if the team do what they should have done, which was been very firm and said, you need to pit, and rather than, Lando, what do you think? You're at Sochi, the track's about 15 miles long. There's totally different weather one side to the other. So I think, if a few team decisions had been made differently, I think Lando would have a win already. But regardless, it's difficult for him to prove. He's had 2 seasons alongside Carlos Sainz, where he was close. I think slightly
very
off
close
him in first year, but I think I would actually say I probably was more impressed with Lando than Carlos in that second season of them together.
I've always said actually those two seasons, I think Lando was the quicker driver, but I think because Sainz had that experience, he was the more rounded driver, especially in the races. But again, that was an early Lando, and he was already that close to Sainz.
Yeah, and you look obviously Sainz now. I do think Leclerc's obviously the quicker driver, but I think Carlos on his day is still keeping sharp. I mean, you don't outscore your teammate through just luck in their first year together at Ferrari. So look, I think that I rate Lando every bit as highly as I rate George, and George has had more opportunity, not complete, but more of an opportunity to showcase it. Obviously, he's got the race win now.
But mate, have you already forgotten what happened in F2 though? Have you forgot what happened about 20 million years ago in F2?
Well, exactly, because that's very representative of the drivers as now. In 2018 Formula 2 season, when George did walk away with the title, granted he did. Lando was second, just ahead of Alex. So what does that tell you? Just ahead of De Vries. So there you go. Lando was closer to De Vries than he was to Russell, I think, by points anyway. Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I don't know what more he can do in what is quite clearly a midfield car right now. Obviously, yes, 2020, 2021, that McLaren was a more competitive car than it is now towards the front of the field. And that gave him those little moments where he got his podiums and he could take those opportunities that presented themselves. I think that Lando as well, because, you look at the online discourse, I think, because Lando is so, well supported and he has such a big fan base, that does also, I think, push people on the other side even more against him when without too much basis, and then jumping on the small, because he very rarely makes mistakes. You very rarely see Lando making mistakes. He's very consistent. He's clearly very quick. He made, Ricciardo, that season looks bad because Lando was gapping him by 3-4 tenths every qualifying session. That's why because Lando was the one who was pulling the performances out of that car. If Lando had been struggling and himself, then no one would have looked at Ricciardo with such question marks, I guess, in those 2 seasons together. But Lando did the job when he needed to, and the fact that Ricciardo could do the job on the occasion, especially in 21, just showcased how mustard Lando is. Yeah, I do think he's slightly underrated. I would somewhat agree.
Yeah, he's one of those drivers where, I mean, again, you talked about it, he just doesn't make mistakes. He's unbelievably consistent. Whenever there's a result on the table, he's able to get it. Correct me if I'm wrong, last year he was the only driver to get a podium outside of the top 3 teams. I don't think, did Alonso or Ocon get a podium last year?
Was it Imola, wasn't it?
Yeah, Imola. He was the only driver. So, when the opportunity was there, he's obviously he's a bit of an Imola and also I think Austria specialist as well. So as we're recording this, it'll be exciting to see what he can do next time out. But he is a driver who I think he's a polarizing figure because he is so popular, and I think the more popular you get, and I think this is any industry, the more popular you get, the more haters you're going to have, and your haters are going to be more vocal than ever before the bigger you get. And I feel like that's why there is that kind of discourse around Lando Norris now, whether you like, his personality or his antics or, on or off the track. As a driver, his qualifying, I think, speed is just incredible. He had some, again, I go back to 2021. Was he on the front row in one of the Austria races with Max? I think he had an unbelievable quali somewhere there.
Yeah, he was putting purple sectors. I think he was within like 800ths, I think, of pole. He was just off Max. I think he purpled the first 2 sectors and lost it in the last or something. I actually watched that back quite recently. That's why I think I remember that one. But yeah, he's got a... when he's got the car underneath him, and he's very, I guess that's the thing as well, he's very confident in this McLaren, which is clearly a bit of an unusual car because Carlos has mentioned it, Daniel has obviously mentioned it, that it's a very unusual car on the brakes. That's a certain characteristic that obviously Lando's always had to live with because that's all he knows. Oscar's obviously come in, he's had experience with the Alpine, but not, Caesar's driving, he's done a few test days and that. So,
and I don't think he ever actually drove the 2022 Alpine either last year. I don't know if he ever did a test to actually drive that year's car.
I think you're right.
He's only ever driven like 2018 Renaults, basically.
Yeah, and look, certain characteristics do carry over. I think Daniel's struggles carried over from 21 to 22 because certain things will carry over, even though the philosophy of the car generally changes. But yeah, I mean, Lando's just very at home with that type of car. Whatever makes that McLaren unique to drive, it's working for him. So it's good.
Yeah, I think it's almost exactly the conversation we had about Albon in terms of, we'd like to see him in a better car. I've always said, I think Lando's completed the midfield. What more does he have to prove? Yes, the Lando no wins, Again, quality slander. He doesn't have a Grand Prix win in a midfield car. Shocker. But other than that, he's just proved everything. He's had podium. He's had some incredible, giant killing performances. Like had Sochi 2021 stayed dry, Lewis wasn't overtaking him. Lewis was not. I remember that race. He wasn't. He was getting close, but that McLaren was really efficient down the straight. So potentially that could have been a win in the dry. And it's just, I think. Again, it's the same Albon conversation. How long is he going to wait? Red Bull are starting to get itchy feet about, I think, Checo just a little bit. And if you're Lando, McLaren keep promising all these things. We have a wind tunnel coming. This car is going to be so great next year, the year after that. Rob Marshall's coming into the team. But listen, if that Red Bull seat comes available and if Lando really believes he's a world champion, forget the fact that Max Verstappen might be there or not. You've got to back yourself as a world championship caliber driver, and I think you've got to at least, Christian definitely likes him. There was that cringy stuff in Drive to Survive where he's like, he's young, he's handsome, he's good looking, and it's like, oh my word. So clearly Christian Horner likes Lando Norris. Pause with all of those words. But yeah,
this is the thing, right? There's so many teams where you've got McLaren, you've got Lando. Probably Oscar as well will potentially grow and be able to fight like at the very front. Like, Alpine with Ocon and Gasly, both very good drivers, very proven. Aston Martin, obviously, Fernando. Mercedes, obviously. Ferrari, obviously. There's so many of these teams that even if the driver market wasn't to change, if they could all just get good, then we're fine. We're not like the point is that would Lando have to leave McLaren to get that opportunity? And it is, you know, as much as the ATR, and I do have faith that it's going to close up the field somewhat, is it going to make the top 6 teams competitive next year? No. So that's where Lando's has to make a kind of somewhat of a decision.
Yeah, and certainly shout out to also McLaren Fan TV. I mean, those guys, they've been in the doldrums a lot, so I want to see, you know, from Had and P, I want to see McLaren on the up.
They deserve some W's, them two good lads.
Exactly, yeah. Shout out to McLaren Fan TV. So yeah, definitely go check them out. Now, next up, now this is maybe actually, even though he's only the second driver, I think potentially might be the most controversial, Charles Leclerc. Now, this is a very interesting one in terms of is he underrated? Now, a few days ago, I did a video. He's had a rough 2023. There's just no doubt about it. I don't think he's driving at his best. You know, there's been a few kind of rough races and rough sessions where, whether it's crashes, whether it's not nailing the one lap that he did have, whether it was the team's fault or not, he did have a lap, you know, in Canada to make it into Q3, and he made a mistake in the wet. But there was that amazing start to 2022, and again, for the moment where he did have a championship car, he was right up there with Max. But you know, do you think he's underrated? I did a video 3 days ago talking about the fact that, to me at the moment, the 3 drivers that are just in a different league compared to everyone else are Verstappen, Alonso, and Hamilton. And it always pains me not to put Leclerc on that list, because I do think he's speed-wise and talent-wise, he's absolutely as good as those guys. But there's just a few deficiencies still. Maybe it's the frustration starting to show because of Ferrari, because it's another disappointing year. I don't know what it is, but there's the crashes as well. And as much as, you know, I don't know what's a better slander name, actually. Lando No Wins or Charles Lecrash. I mean, they're both pretty decent. I think No Wins comes out on top a little bit more, but I think Charles is one of those frustrating drivers. It is tight, yeah, let us know. But I think Charles is one of those frustrating drivers where, do you think if he gets a championship level car again, is he still making those same mistakes that he did in Imola when the championship was still tight, and also France as well? Because that's the real question. That's the real, when we're talking about Hamilton, Alonso, Verstappen, those guys don't make mistakes very often, and when they do, it's a massive thing because they don't. You know, it's almost made out more than it is because they're so consistent. But do you think Charles will learn from those mistakes? And do you think ultimately, you know, because he's so talented, we have to compare him to those 3, the absolute echelon? And do you think he is on their level?
I think I don't see anyone questioning his speed, right? I don't see anyone questioning his ability to extract the maximum from a car, and more often than not crash. Look, yes, he has crashed. You know, it's still proportionally, it's a small portion, but because these crashes have so often been, you know, from either potentially kind of winning positions like France, or, you know, instances where there's clearly the pace in the car if he hits 100%. Look, Charles has to have any shot in this Ferrari, he has to be on that edge, because the Ferrari isn't quite the package that can fight with the Red Bull. You know, Max can drive, you know, and Max isn't one to drive less than 100%, don't get me wrong, right? But he knows, I think we've seen that this year, just in Max's decision making throughout, that he can, you know, hold it back and race for the greater good of his season, not, you know, completely defending moves or going for the attack like he was when he was, you know, chasing in 2021. He spent a lot of that season chasing Lewis towards the end anyway. So I think that is Charles underrated? I don't consider him to be underrated. I do think the mistakes deserve the critique that they get. I do think that he's just as fast as Lewis, Fernando, Max. I think his speed is there. I think that, you know, Lewis has this old head on him. Fernando has this old head on him. You know, they're
even older, yeah.
Yeah, well, they're both in cars that are quite closer to the Ferrari. The Ferrari is in that kind of 3-team fight. And
I think more consistent as well, because both of the Ferrari drivers, Miami was one where, you know, Leclerc said it was a little bit tricky in qualifying. The rear of the car was all over the place, and then in the race it was massive understeer. So I think the Ferrari is certainly inconsistent from track to track.
Yeah.
Maybe that raw, we saw a bit of that raw performance, I think, in Canada, and it was a bit of a, I think the execution of the weekend by Ferrari perhaps wasn't the best. But I think the one thing I want to ask you, let's put Ferrari aside for a second, and if you put Leclerc in that Mercedes up against Hamilton, in that Aston Martin up against Alonso, and that Red Bull up against Max, which of those three drivers in their cars is he beating over a season, do you think?
It's a good question.
I know I come with a difficult question. You didn't think it was going to be easy, right?
He's not beating Max. I don't think he's beating Max. I think Max has just got that. He's got more experience than Charles. You think, forget how long Max has been in this sport. I don't think he's beating Max. Fernando. Oh, Fernando. I don't know. That's tough. That is very tough. Charles versus Fernando at Aston Martin. I would say Fernando just about edges it in points, but I would say their performances would be very similar. And probably the same for Lewis, to be fair. I think Lewis is driving at a very good level now, as he's getting more comfortable with this car as well. And I think that Charles would extract, even more than George is. So I think he'd get outscored by Fernando and Lewis. I think they would be that little bit more consistent, because I think they've got that maturity and that, they would drive within the limits of the car. I think Max would be quicker over the course of the season. I don't think Fernando and Lewis would be quicker than Charles, but I think that's.
I also really, in terms of his development as well, I mean, he's got this, again, I've called him, I think I've said this about a million times now, over one lap, all things being equal, I think he's the fastest driver over one lap in Formula One. Like his.
Do you think he's faster than Max though, over a lap?
Because I would say over one lap, you put the same car, I think he's just. I mean, they're all really close, by the way. We're not talking about a bunch of random people off the street that can't drive. It's going to be close, but I think over a lap, I'd give it to Charles in terms of raw pace.
But I just think that Max knows he doesn't have to push as hard in qualifying as Charles does. That Monaco lap from Max, just that final sector. I know we've talked about this before, right? And it is just, you watch it back, you watch the Jolyon Palmer breakdown of just the absolute zero margin he's leaving. And Max can unlock that when he knows he needs to, I suppose. And in that qualifying session, he knew that the tyres were tumbling and he needed to push at 100%. And he did it, and he didn't shunt it in the wall like Charles did in 21. So I've said that before,
I'd answer to that,
but I'm not so convinced now, to be honest.
The only answer I'd have to that is Charles Leclerc's lap that never was in 2022 before Checo binned it. There's a great video looking at his sectors, and he was in 2022 before Checo binned it. I know he got pole anyway, but he was on an almighty lap around Monaco last year. So yeah, it's close, but again, that's we're splitting hairs here. Both great drivers, but I do also think in terms of the one thing about Charles is also how is he out of the car as a team leader in terms of developing the car. We've heard a lot about how, for example, Lewis he was very vocal about the Mercedes, that they went in the wrong direction. They needed his experience and his guidance to kind of get the car back to where where he's more happy with it, and the results have come. The car has improved. You look at Fernando. Is he does he develop a car well? I suppose we're going to find out now with the Aston Martin, because obviously this is his first season. Max, whatever you want to say about his driving style, whatever you want to say about other teammates driving his cars, the way his leadership, that car works for him and it's winning championships. So how do you feel he is off the track in terms of motivating the team and pushing the development towards where he's more happy? Do you think he's kind of got that experience and got that authority within the team?
Well, look, again, he's been able to, he got most pole positions last year. He's the only driver who's not a Red Bull to get pole positions this year, in obviously the Baku sprint and the race. I think that, to be honest, I think Charles' bigger issue really is knowing when to listen and when to take things into your own hands, right? Carlos has done this numerous times where he's, overridden a decision. It's difficult, isn't it? Because as a driver, you do have to, again, go back to Lando Sochi, right? You need to lean on your team at certain times. I think in some instances, I am surprised how, for example, Canada qualifying when Charles was, calling very, very early, for soft tyres. He could have just driven into the pits and they would have chucked softs on. He chose to listen to the team and fair enough. But I think you look at the greats, you look at your Schumachers, you look at your Sennas, you look at your Hamiltons, you look at your Vettels, you look at your, Alonso's and your Verstappens now, and these drivers don't always just sit back and listen to the team. They, more often than not, when they override the team, they more often than not make the correct decision. It doesn't always work out, of course, right? And it's a risk, right? Because if you go against the team and then it backfires, then you're the mug. But I think that's more than the car development, because at the end of the day, he is able to extract that pace. And I do think that Chuck Schull and anything, whether it was a Sauber when he first came into F1 and he just, wiped the floor with Ericsson, he was able to hit we've not seen Schull not be able to extract pace from any car that he's driven, even the piece of crap 2020 Ferrari, right? So
there were some unreal performances in that 2020 Ferrari. I mean, the podiums, that was a midfield to lower midfield car. Where did Seb finish that year? Was he like 11th, 12th, something around there? So
I mean, it wasn't pretty.
Insane.
It wasn't pretty in terms of points, but Schull was able to extract those performances. I just think, that is the thing. And he knows, it's Ferrari as well. It's this big institution with all this pressure and all this expectation, more so than any other team. It's not just the internal pressure. Every team feels that, but it's all the expectation around it. It's all the clown memes and all that comes with it, as well as the internal pressure in Italian media and from the Italian people, because it's the only team that actually really, really means something to a lot of people. So I think, it's hard, man, because it's like that relationship, Charles to Ferrari, is different. It's different. It's not just a sporting relationship. There's something deeper there, and for him to, it takes more for him to stand up to that team and be like, no, I'm making this decision. I'm making this call, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, we learn from it.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a deeper connection with that team. You're going back to his godfather, Bianchi. That's a very big connection as well there. So I think that, it's also very difficult because Ferrari, as much as the grass is not always greener, obviously there's a lot of talk about, where should he go? Maybe some doors might open up for him, but the grass is not always greener.
Correct.
Maybe does he take a punt, at Audi in 2026? But, even that's a long-term project. So it's very difficult. But at the same time, the clock is ticking on Ferrari, and the longer it goes on for, despite that connection, how long can he stay there until he just says, right, enough is enough? What about if he's 27, 28, 29, maybe 30 years old and still hasn't had a proper championship level car? So yeah, I think he's stuck a little bit, but at the same time, there's worse places to be. Like, think about Lando Norris. There's worse places to be stuck than Ferrari. So yeah, he's still got plenty of time. He's got the entire team around him. So I think he's an interesting one. It's all about, when we talk about Charles, forget about comparing him to random midfield drivers. It's about the best of the best. This guy is absolutely, in my opinion, going to win a championship somewhere. If he doesn't win a championship, we could be looking at the greatest driver to never win one. So I've got to believe that he will. And that's why the comparison, it's Alonso, it's Verstappen, it's Hamilton, and nothing else. That's how good Charles Leclerc is. And, if he's underrated, again, maybe let us know as well, because he's definitely a polarizing driver. So just one left, Tomo. And who do you think it is, by the way? Who do you think is
I think I know
the name that...
I think I know.
Well,
because
give me a shout.
It's the person that I think is the most underrated driver in Formula One right now, which I believe is Esteban Ocon.
Correct. That was the number one name. Every single he's done it. 2/3 of all of the tweets had Esteban Ocon as underrated. Now, here's the thing. I don't think that Esteban Ocon is underrated because I think actually before even, he's another one of those drivers in the midfield that's almost proved everything he can. He's had, I think, 3 really solid years. He had his kind of rough sort of comeback in 2020. He wasn't quite the driver that he is now. He's a different driver. So the last 3 years, ever since 2021, he has done a fantastic job. And I kind of compare him to Lando in terms of, you've almost completed the midfield. There's not much more you can prove, and it's now about, could you win races? I mean, I know he's a race winner, but we're talking races consistently, like, the likes of Max or even Lewis in the past. That's the level that I think you've got to compare him. Now, could he challenge for a title? And because we had that same conversation about Lando, I did a poll, basically, which absolutely got people fuming.
I did a poll.
And I wanted to know, if Esteban Ocon really is underrated, then surely people are going to say that him and Lando are kind of on a similar level. And people, the majority, I think it was over 70%, said that Lando over a season would beat him in the same car. So That's why to me he isn't underrated. I think he's rated bang on right. He's a quality driver who now deserves to be in a better car, but he is not better than Lando Norris. There's not, I think he's on that kind of Sergio Perez, Carlos Sainz level.
Why not? Why is he not better than Lando?
Decent job.
Well, why not? What makes you think that?
I think Lando over one lap is definitely just has a little bit more of an edge. I think Lando has also had worse cars for the most part than Esteban Ocon. And even last year, I go back to what happened last year. I feel like Alpine had a tiny bit better car than McLaren, and what Lando did in that car to, again, almost single-handedly, pressurize Alpine. I think Lando is just a better package overall. And again, if the majority of people think that Lando is a much better driver and would definitely beat Ocon, then I don't know. Then I don't think he's underrated, because otherwise, who are you rating him up against? Are you rating Ocon up against K-Mag or Bottas? Because against those drivers, he is a better driver than those. So it depends where you judge Esteban Ocon, I think. So I mean, I'd love to see him though in a better car, because what he did up against Alonso, whatever you want to say about the reliability, blah blah blah, he more than stood face to face. Not literally, because he's about 6'2" and Fernando's about 5'7", but he more than went toe to toe with Fernando Alonso, yes. And that says everything you need to know about his quality. But it's weird. People think that there's no way he's going to beat Lando Norris, but he was very good up against Fernando Alonso. So where do you sit on Esteban Ocon?
Yeah, I definitely think I think that Lando poll proves the point, right? I rate Lando very highly. I said it myself. I think he's underrated. I think they're both underrated. I think that Ocon is honestly every bit as good as Lando, and I think he could do an equivalent job and be right up there with like what George is doing at the moment. You look through their the teammates. Against Perez, at Force India,
are you just going to skip over Rio Haryanto? Or no, Pascal Wehrlein, sorry. You're just going to skip over Pascal Wehrlein like that?
No, I am going to skip over them. No, I think that, convincingly quicker than Perez, overlap in terms of one lap pace anyway. And I mean, they had a few comments together, didn't they? So that would have skewed the points from the realistic.
They're both very aggressive drivers, aren't they? They're both very...
Exactly. They're both very aggressive drivers, and that was the perfect storm, right? But like you say, again, Fernando Alonso, toe to toe, Fernando is better than Ocon. I'm not saying he's not. And he proved that in the races over the course of the year. But especially in qualifying, Ocon was very, 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 very close. Their gap was, I think, the smallest gap of any two teammates over the course of both years as well. I'm sure 21 and 22, you can fact check that yourself. But I'm pretty sure they were the closest. There was a hair's breadth. And we think how high we consider Fernando Alonso. And I think that Fernando's fantastic, right? I think one lap pace, he's there. He was there with Fernando. He genuinely was. And you look at the caliber of teammate. The stinker in his report card, of course, was Ricciardo. Ricciardo came in and was convincingly quicker than Ocon. It was very one-sided for most of that season. But also, I think that was, for me, that second season Ricciardo was prime Ricciardo. To be honest, I think
he was unreal.
So good. And I think Ocon had just had a year out, come back in. New team to build
COVID
up into.
Season as well, which you never know how that affects a driver returning to Formula 1.
Of course. So, you look at and now I think he's doing a better job than Gasly, and I think Gasly's very good as well. I think it's close. They're very close for sure, but I think he has got the measure on Pierre. And again, every time he's been presented with one of these opportunities, which in a midfield team you have to take these opportunities when they are presented to yourself. He didn't instruct Bottas and Stroll to take everyone out in Hungary so he could dawdle on through and take the win. And he had Sebastian Vettel, four-time F1 world champion, who's been there, done that, got the t-shirt behind him every single lap, and he didn't buckle. Monaco took the opportunity, got the podium. He's been on every step of the podium now. I think that Ocon is every bit as good as Lando.
And also, I saw actually today. I saw today made the call during the wets. In the wet on slicks to go, to pit for the Inters. He made the call and said, "I'm coming in." He had everything to lose. Yeah. He was fighting for that podium, and he made the call at the right time as well. So, yeah, he's a really complete driver now. I think there's still, what deficiencies are there in his driving? Perhaps a little bit of red mist. It's weird. There's a balance, isn't there? You've got to be. On the track, you've got no teammates realistically. In reality, it's all about you. You have your, teammate, but you've got to be tough. You've got to be aggressive. Sometimes I think he just steps over the line in terms of, being over aggressive, but I mean, that's a judgment call, isn't it? He's also had to be that aggressive in life because, you know, he didn't have the advantages that, you know, financially growing up that everyone else did. So I think you build a more fighter mentality because of that. I've always said that about Ocon, that he has got that kind of red mist mentality because that's what he's had to, you know, that's what he's had to grow up with. So he's a really interesting driver, Ocon. And again, to me, it's just that Lando comparison because to me, they're on a very similar level where when you give them then a race, they've completed the midfield, as I said, but when you then give them a race-winning car, I think that asks a very different set of questions. Because Carlos Sainz, I think, was in a very similar position. I think in 2019 and 2020, Sainz was flying. Sainz was one of the best drivers in the midfield, a quality driver, exactly where Lando and Ocon are now. And when he did get to Ferrari, he had a good kind of season in the midfield in 2021. But then when he got into a race-winning car in 2022, he wasn't quite able to kind of reach that next level like the likes of Leclerc. So would Lando or, you know, Esteban in that same situation be able to raise their game as the car, you know, gets quicker as well and the pressure gets higher?
I do think that Lando has that slight higher potential ceiling than Ocon. I would say right now, I think there's nothing in it. I think they would go toe to toe, right? But I do think if presented with those circumstances, like you say, I would, and mainly just because Lando is a bit younger, and he's less experienced in Formula One. He's got more time to, because I feel like once you've been in for like 5 seasons, I feel like you've kind of, you're getting close to like, how much more can you improve from then on? I think it's like diminishing returns, right?
I mean, you keep telling me that Lance Stroll is going to improve every single year. But anyway, that's a conversation for a different video.
I mean, I'm surprised Lance didn't come up in this list, Dowdas. Did Lawrence not reply?
Do you know what? I pretty much saw every single, when I asked, you know, who's the most underrated driver on the grid, I pretty much saw every single driver, even Verstappen, Hamilton, and Alonso were mentioned. But the 2 names that I don't think I saw were Stroll and De Vries. So, you know, make of that what you will.
All right, I've got one for you before we wrap. Actually, what about Max? Then? Do you think Max is underrated? Because right now, like, I think surely he's putting himself into the conversation now, right up there with like the greatest to ever do it. Surely he's getting close to that now.
The only thing that I think, I mean, he's had a bit of controversy, Tomo. You might have not known that.
No, never.
I think the only thing that I want to see, because to me, it's never really about the wins or the championships. You know, you want to say what you want to say about the way he's won the championships, but I want to see him in the same car up against a more difficult, like proper caliber teammate. I think that's the only thing that I think he is an all-time great, just in terms of his talent. And, you know, there was a big discussion about that, wasn't there? You know, what even is an all-time great? Ultimately, that's such a subjective term, you know, is that the top 5 drivers of all time, the top 10, the top 15? To me, on talent alone and what he has achieved and the way he's achieved it, the fact that, yes, he's had dominant cars, but it's not even a question. Like, I go into race weekends not asking who's going to win the race. I ask, you know, who's going to be second. That's literally the only conversation we have because Max is not just winning with what he has, he's dominating. And I do think when you go back to 2021, we did see that was a really close championship where he went toe-to-toe with Lewis. You know, say what you want about the way that season ended, but he proved that on a speed and driving level, he is on that level. So, yeah, I've always just said the only thing I want to see him. To me, he is already an all-time great. By the time he retired at the end of this year, when he is going to be a 3-time world champion, that is a resume of an all-time great. But I want to see him same car up against I'd love to see him in the same car against Leclerc. I'd love to see that. I think that would just, if he would beat Leclerc, say, in the same car, that would be almost, or Lando, you know, as well. Depends how good Lando becomes.
Imagine that.
Fernando as well. Exactly. That's the only thing that I kind of want to see Max do in his career, because he's got all the t-shirts, he's got all the trophies. He himself has even started talking about the fact that he's bored of winning championships, which is what happens when you have no competition. So that's the only thing. To me, he is an all-time great.
There's one thing beating your teammate. There's another thing making your teammates look distinctly average, which he's done to. I mean, he didn't towards the very end. Maybe with Ricciardo, he did seem to have that momentum, right? Definitely Gasly, definitely Albon, definitely Perez. 3 drivers who, you know, 2 of those drivers not 2. One of those drivers has been in this list, and all 3 of them are now proven F1 drivers who I think are considered to be, you know, very, very good.
They are all quality. Any combination right now in 2023 of Gasly, Albon, you know, Checo, any combination of those 3, Oh, that's a great driver lineup.
Yeah, you're not
That's
turning
incredible.
that down. You're not turning that down at all.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. That's like, yeah, it's scarily impressive. It is scarily impressive.
But yeah, that wraps up our underrated list, taking kind of the top picks from what the fans had to say over on Twitter. Of course, let us know your thoughts on everything we've talked about. And yeah, from me and Tomo, we'll see you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.